When I was in university, I would take 6 courses every semester because I was doing a dual degree, and I wanted to get it all done in 4 years. This meant a lot of semesters I was up to my neck in years in homework and studying all the time. My university had a library that was open until midnight. I was also interning the semester, so I really had almost no time to do my work. I still lived on campus at this point, and my suite mates could be very loud and distracting sometimes. This was a Wednesday night, so I had 3 classes that day and my internship. I also had 2 exams the following day, so right after I finished up at my internship, I went straight to the library. Our campus library was very big. When I got there at 9 p.m., there was still a decent amount of people everywhere, but from 9 to 10 it quiets down a lot, and I was planning on being there until 12 studying for my 2 exams the next day. Around 11, most people were gone, but there were still some around. I was sitting at one of the tables sandwiched between 2 bookshelves on either side, so it was a little more private and secluded where I was sitting. Less distractions. By 11 o'clock, some guy who looked to be in his upper 20s came into the section and passed one of the multiple empty tables and came to mine, where he sat down diagonally across from me at the table. I looked up, and he looked back at me and smiled as he was setting his books down. I looked back down and just tried to focus on my studying, and not wonder too much why he decided to sit at my table. I was going through the slides to study on my laptop, when the guy at my table said excuse me, then asked me if I by chance was taking a specific economics course. I politely told him no, sorry, hoping that would be the end of it. But then he started explaining why he asked that, because his quote-unquote professor is a bitch and gives pop quizzes every day. I said, wow, that really sucks. Then I tried to go back to studying. Mentally, my mind wasn't completely into the material anymore now. Now I was distracted by the presence of this man, who I had a feeling was going to keep trying to talk to me. I looked up from my laptop screen and saw that man looking at me, smiling with his lips. I looked back down at my laptop, contemplating getting up and moving elsewhere, or just leaving. He then asked my name. I made up a name and said Chelsea. He said, "You have such blue eyes, Chelsea." This was when I started to wonder if this man was really here to study or creep on women. And the fact that he looked like he was almost 30 didn't help. I asked him what the name of his economics professor was. He took a second, then said Professor Davis. I asked if he knew the first name. He shook his head no. I went straight to ratemyprofessor.com and looked up any professors with the last name Davis at our school. And only one came up, a calculus professor whose last reviews were left years ago. I decided to get up and go ask the security worker at the front door for help. As I got up, I felt the stare of that man at the table watching me walk over to the security worker and tell him that this man was creeping me out and I don't think he's a student. The security worker walked back over with me and asked to see the man's student ID. He started looking through his wallet, then his pockets, and then he said he must have left it at his dorm. The security worker then asked what dorm building he's in. The guy was clearly lying because he didn't know what to say, and eventually just said, "I honestly don't remember what it's called." The security worker walked him out of the library, and he came back and told me to just be careful while walking back to my dorm. I thanked him. The whole rest of the time at the library, my mind was so distracted just thinking about what a creep that guy was. I did my best to keep studying, and around 12, I knew it was time to wrap it up so I could get some sleep. I packed up and left through the same way the security guard escorted that man out. He wasn't standing there at that moment. I don't know where he went. I started walking through the basically deserted campus. No one walks around that late on a Monday to Wednesday night. That's why eventually when I was nearing my dorm building, and I heard at least one loud sound of a shoe hitting the concrete behind me. I turned around, but I saw no one there. I knew for a fact I heard a footstep though. I started to run now, which may have been a mistake, because the second I started to run, which was made more difficult because of my backpack, I heard running footsteps behind me. I turned and saw that man from the library sprinting towards me. I screamed at the top of my lungs, but only for a second before I was tackled to the ground and had a hand over my mouth. He kept threatening me, saying, "You better shut up or I'll kill you." I genuinely thought my life was about to end. I was trying to call out for help still, but it was muffled by his hand. He then got to his feet and started to drag me by the throat out of sight of the main walkways, and I saw he was dragging me in the direction of the woods right by the dorms. I managed to remove his hand from my mouth for just long enough to scream again. It was enough to get the attention of these two guys who came running over yelling, "Hey, stop," at my kidnapper. The man let go of me and started running off towards the woods. The two guys came over to me, and I'm sure they were asking me if I was okay and whatnot. I blocked all noise out for a few moments, and I was in total shock. I completely let my emotions out and started bawling my eyes out. The two guys called university police, and I did my best to keep myself together and explain. We went to the library to ask the security worker for his description of the man as well. It matched my description of the man. The police were also able to use the footage for the library cameras to get a clear picture of the man's face. The picture was sent out to all students' phones and emails and the school website. And that same night, there was an anonymous tip that the man was at a late-night dive bar down the road from school. The police arrived to the bar and arrested him. The level of trauma this induced on me was incredible. I can't even imagine the trauma for those who weren't as lucky as me in situations like this. We moved to a new town when I was 7. Any memories before that move I consider to be very early childhood, and a lot of those memories are blurry at this point. This is one of those memories. This happened at some age before 7, I know that. If I had to guess, I was 5, maybe 6. There was the local town library that our mom would always take my brothers and I to. It was a few blocks away, actually. I remember this one day was my mom and my little brother, who was a toddler at this point. We started the day at the mall, probably spent hours there tagging along with our mom shopping. Whenever we'd go to this mall, she'd always bring us to the McDonald's inside the mall to get us ice cream cones. I remember we got ice cream on this particular day, because on the way to the library after leaving the mall, I still had some of the cone left in my hand. We arrived to the library, and there was this kids' computer section that my mom would let me stay at and play computer games while she went and did whatever she'd do. When I got bored at playing whatever old online computer games there were at the time, I got up and started walking through the aisles of books in the kids section of the library, looking for the I Spy books. The kids section was in the far corner of the library, and while I was walking from aisle to aisle, I heard a psst from behind me. I turned around and saw nothing. I was looking at the back wall of the library, which had another shelf of books leaning on it. Then I saw half of a grown man's face peer around the shelf and said, "Peekaboo." I remember laughing and feeling no sense of danger. He did it again. He went back behind the shelf, then peered out his head again and said, "Peekaboo." Again, I laughed. He asked me what I was looking for, and I said the I Spy books. He said he'll help me find it. He came over and took my hand and started leading me through the aisles, leading us, I guess, to the section of books that began with the letter I. And there they were, at least 5 I Spy books next to each other. I grabbed my favorite one, the treasure hunt one, and he said, "Let's go sit down and play." He led me to a table in the corner by a couple children's computers, and we started looking through the pictures. This went on for some time, and he was asking me questions about myself as we played I Spy. A question that still sticks out to me the most is, "Who are you here with?" And I told him my mom and little brother. At some point after this, he said something implying that there's a kid's playroom downstairs, and I, at that age, never knew that there was a downstairs to the library. He said we could take the book down there. He led me to the door that led to the basement of the library, which, for reference, is actually where events and meetings for certain clubs and organizations are held. And there is actually a little playroom down there, I guess for parents who have to bring their kids with them during any of the meetings. The man led me to that little playroom. There were various toys in there, most notably a Lego set and a Lego table, and then there were a bunch of chairs. He set the I Spy book down on the Lego table. This is where things get really uncomfortable thinking back on. As he was trying to forcibly get me to play with the toys, I started to get uncomfortable. And around this time, over the loudspeaker, a female librarian said into the intercom, "Will Liam come to the front, please? Your mother's looking for you." At this time, the man went to turn off the lights in the room, and now it was pitch black inside. He said in the dark, "We're gonna play hide and seek." This was the first moment I was genuinely freaked out, and I started to yell for my mom. I remember he kept telling me to be quiet, and his voice was getting louder as he was getting closer to me in the dark, until he had his hands on me. I thankfully managed to run past him and out the door of that room, and I ran down the dark hallway back to the stairs, and as I was running up the stairs, I had that same childhood feeling of running up the basement stairs after turning off the lights, only 100 times worse, because I genuinely was scared I was going to be grabbed. I made it back to the main floor of the library and ran straight to the front desk calling for my mom. She was at the front desk with a group of librarians, and I remember the relief on my mom's face when she saw me. I told her there was some man who took me downstairs, and she literally lost it. The next thing I remember from there was a bunch of police in the building searching around, but I never saw that man again. He must have exited the building through a different way. I remember speaking to some woman who was probably with the police, asking me very delicate questions. I never really asked my mom about this experience that many times, because it's very uncomfortable, and I'd rather just not think of it. I used to work at the local public library when I was in my early 20s. I'd work the night shifts as my second job at least 3 times a week after my first job. I'd get there at 6 and would work till closing time at 9. I would also be the one to lock up the place after closing, but I wouldn't just leave right after the library would close. I'd have to shut off all the computers, do some cleaning and organizing, stock the shelves with all the returned books and DVDs from the day, take out the garbage, and only then could I leave. It was a Friday night approaching closing time. Most of the other library staff was gone already. It was just myself and one of the female librarians left. I had made a couple last call announcements to the remaining library patrons, alerting them that the library would be closing soon. I was already cleaning up the place, trying to finish up early so I could leave and just start my weekend. The only other employees still there said goodbye to me as soon as the clock struck 9 o'clock. I announced on the intercom that the library was closed. The 2 guests that were left got up from their tables and started packing up their things before leaving through the door. After that, when I saw no one else in the building, I locked the front door. I proceeded to start fixing all the chairs to be neatly tucked under their tables. Then I started emptying all the garbage cans, and when it was time to bring them outside to the dumpster on the side, I unlocked the front door again and brought them out. It was quiet outside. The library was kind of tucked away from any main roads. When I came back inside, I locked the door again. Now all I had to do was restock all the returned books and DVDs from the day. I grabbed the 2 boxes and started with the DVDs, which was easier since the DVD section was smaller. It took about 5 to 10 minutes. During this time, I thought for sure I heard something come from one of the book aisles. I started walking through the aisles till I found an open book laying on the floor, which had clearly just fallen off the shelf. I put it back in its place, and for a second I stood there and just wondered, how could that have happened? I went back to work, and after finishing the DVDs, I took the box of books and started putting them one by one back on the shelves. Going in alphabetical order, I started with the A's. The books in the box were sorted in alphabetical order to make it easy. As I worked my way down the shelves trying to bang this out and go home, I heard another noise nearby. 2 times in less than 20 minutes. That was no coincidence. I set the box down and started walking through the aisles of books again. I found another 2 books on the ground in another aisle. Someone was in here. I walked out to the open area with all the tables and such and yelled out, "Excuse me, the library is closed." There was silence, until I heard something from across the library, from the children's section. I approached the noises and it started to sound like some rabid animal making growling sounds. I also heard books being thrown onto the floor. It was coming from one aisle. As I built up the courage to peek down the aisle, I saw some woman wearing a nightgown throwing random books off the shelf, making these disgusting animal-like sounds. I didn't say anything. I turned and ran to the office where we had the phone. I didn't have a cell phone at this time. I locked the office door and closed the blinds to the window. Then I called 911. I reported that there was some sickly woman in the library and I think they should send an ambulance. They asked if I had approached the woman, and I said no, she looked like she could be dangerous. When the operator asked me if the woman was still in the same spot, I opened the blinds, and I screamed because that woman was right on the other side of the glass looking in. Her pupils were so big that she looked demonic. I said to the operator, "She's right outside the office." The woman started to bang on the glass, screaming gibberish. She tried opening the door, and when it didn't open, she turned around and sat on a chair facing the office. The operator asked me to keep the blind open and watch her. The woman was wobbly as she sat down, so I noted she was definitely high out of her mind. 2 police cars and an ambulance showed up to the library. The woman was put in handcuffs because she tried fighting the police officers, but nothing she was saying made any sense. She was put in the back of an ambulance and was taken away. I never found out what the hell she was on. I don't know how she got inside. Maybe while I was taking the garbage out, or maybe she was inside before I even locked the place up. Either way, it definitely made being in the library alone after closing pretty unsettling from there on out. When I was a kid, before we lived in Texas, we lived in a home that had this huge backyard in Georgia that made me feel like the most popular kid in class. Anytime playing outdoor games or sports was ever an idea, my backyard would be the spot to go since we had a 2-acre backyard. The backyard was surrounded by woods on 3 sides. It also had many trees throughout the yard, a trampoline in one corner, a hot tub, a big detached 3-car garage, and an above-ground pool. For a middle-class area, we really had everything you could want in a backyard. There was enough open grass to play any sports: soccer, baseball, football, anything. We even played hide-and-seek tag, or manhunts as we would call it. One Friday when we were in like 6th grade, my friends and I wanted to have a camp-out sleepover in my backyard. It was Mike, other Mike, who I'll call Michael, and Jason. We all had to get our parents' permissions, of course, but we were like 11 or 12 and it was a Friday. None of our parents had any reason to say no. Plus, my family has lots of camping equipment, including 2 tents that could easily fit 2 of us in each one. After all of us got permission from our parents, we made arrangements for them to get to my house around 5 so we could play sports in the backyard. We had 2 mini soccer nets in the yard that we used to play soccer 2-on-2. We did that for like half an hour. Then we played baseball for another maybe half hour. And after just sitting around for a few minutes, regaining our energy, my parents ordered pizza for us, so we ate around 6:30 or 7 if I had to guess. The sun was starting to go down a little bit now, so now came the time to set up the tents before it was too dark. I was pretty good with setting up tents because I was a Boy Scout and we just recently learned how to set up tents. My friends kind of helped, but I did most of the work. By the time they were done, it was decently dark out. The backyard lights were on, giving a nice glow. It was now dark enough for us to play our favorite game, manhunts. There were a million spots to hide in the backyard. We played in pairs. It was Mike and I hiding first, and Michael and Jason would be hunting. Mike and I split up. Our goal was to get back to the home base point, which was the back door to the house. No camping by the door was allowed. The trampoline was in the far corner of the yard before the woods. I crawled under that to hide. When the hunters would start looking, they had to blow a whistle to let the hiders know they were starting. Once I heard the whistle, I stayed under the trampoline waiting it out, watching the 2 of them in the distance looking around. I was waiting for a good moment to creep closer to the back door. I had my sights on the hot tub, which was right next to the house. If I could make it over to hide behind the hot tub, I could straight line beeline it to the back door. So when both Michael and Jason had their backs to me looking in different areas of the backyard, I sprinted towards the hot tub, and just as I got right behind it and ducked down, I heard one of the trash bins on the side of the house almost topple over. Then I noticed the motion detecting light on the side turn on. The hot tub was by that corner of the house, but it wouldn't have triggered that light. I went to peer around the corner to the side yard, and I saw a tall person dressed in dark clothes speed walking away in the direction of the woods before entering the woods. It wasn't my dad. I ran to my friends and called the game off, then went to tell my dad about it. We came out and looked around the woods for a few minutes, and then checked the street for any unusual cars. Nothing and nothing. He said we should sleep inside tonight, which obviously bummed us out. We went inside and just played a game on my PlayStation. I again described to my friends what I saw, to some tall guy walking into the woods on the side of the house after apparently almost knocking over one of our trash bins. We talked about just going back outside and sleeping in the tents since they were already set up anyway. And plus, what were the odds whoever that was still out there hours later? After we finished playing our game, we went back outside quietly to not wake my dad up. Sound like we were hiding the fact that we were going back out there, but we didn't want to advertise it either. We each had a sleeping bag. Mike and I shared a tent, while Michael and Jason shared the other. After a while of joking around and yelling things between tents, we started to quiet down and try to go to sleep. I wasn't asleep yet, but it seems like Mike was. I started hearing walking sounds in the grass nearby, approaching the tent, and then the zipper to the tent was unzipped, and I looked up and saw my dad looking inside the tent. He said, "What are you guys doing out here?" I replied to him something like, "They wanted to sleep out here, so we came back out." Then I took a closer look at the face peering into the tent. I realized it wasn't my dad, but some complete stranger who looked to be my dad's age. It looked like he was about to come in when I screamed bloody murder like a little girl. Everyone woke up and Mike started to scream as well. The man grabbed our ankles and said to be quiet, but he gave up when he realized he was about to be exposed. He left the tent and disappeared. I told my friends to run inside the house, and as we were running to the house, my dad was already coming out the back door in response to our screams. I told him I don't know which way he went, but that the man from before was back. My dad ran around the yard screaming and taunting the creep to come back if he has any balls. We heard it from inside the living room. My mom called the police, of course, and all that really happened when the police officer showed up was he took my recount of what happened, and I'm sure he made a police report, then left. It was good to have a police report at least, so that the cops would be aware of a creep going around. I'm not sure if that man ever came back to our property or not, or if he ever got in trouble for something similar. Either way, it was pretty traumatizing, and it could have gone much worse. This was back a few years, sometime in 2019. I was at a friend's house, I'll call her M for the sake of the story. I was pretty excited for the sleepover. I couldn't wait to talk about all the middle school drama. Now, something you might want to know is M's house was deep in the woods. I mean deep. Anywhere you looked, there was woods, and their nearest neighbor was about a half-mile away. But on the backside of her house was a cliff that led down to the ocean. The night at M's house started off pretty good. Our friend Sam was there too. We played truth or dare, hide and seek, and other teenage games. It was getting pretty late, but we decided to go on a walk down the gravel road that led to the other houses along the way. We asked her mom and she said yes, so we started walking. After another 10 to 15 minutes, we saw a man who was walking on the other side of the street towards us. At first, we weren't thinking much. Maybe this dude was just taking an evening walk as well. But something that didn't seem right was that this man was wearing pretty thick clothing. I'm talking, it almost looked like snow gear, and not to mention it was pretty warm out. At that moment, it was like 60 degrees outside. We all looked at each other as we passed the guy, and that's when it hit us. The stench, the disgusting smell coming off that guy. It was absolutely horrible. Words could not describe how disgusting that smell was. It was so bad that after we finally got a few feet away, my friend took a deep breath, almost like she had been holding it. One of my friends ran into the woods and almost threw up. At this point, we felt it was best to head back. Our friend who almost threw up was begging to go back anyway. We all agreed that it would be the best idea to head back. On our way back, we passed him again. This time we held our breath before we passed him. But when we looked back, we realized he was no longer walking in the opposite direction, but instead he was following us. This was really annoying. That disgusting smelling man was now bringing his stench even closer. We had no choice but to speed up our pace. We started speed walking. We still had about a mile to make it back to M's house. As we began to speed up, so did the random disgusting smelling dude. We all looked at each other, scared and annoyed. We picked up our pace even more, almost to the point where we were jogging. But of course, the man sped up even more. Now at this point, we were running, and my friend Sam looked back, and then we heard it. Sam let out a blood-curdling scream as she looked back, which caused Em and I to look back as well. And what we saw, still to this day, absolutely horrifies me. This man was full-on sprinting at us. He had what looked like a knife or something sharp in his grasp. Em, Sam, and I started screaming as we were sprinting down the road. Our screams caused him to stop chasing us, and he eventually just stopped. but he didn't move. He just stood still, watching as we left. We didn't stay around to see what his intentions were. We just ran straight back to M's house. Once we got back, we slammed the door and decided on not telling her parents, as they were already asleep. We all went to the living room to finish setting up our sleeping areas. A few hours passed. It was about 2 a.m. at this point. We were watching something. I can't remember what, but I know it was some horror movie. Now, I mentioned her house was on a cliff for a reason. Because of this, her house has a lot of windows on the backside overlooking the view. I was sitting on one of the couches that was set up right at the window. It was pitch black outside. All you could hear was the waves and occasional wind. All of a sudden, I heard footsteps outside. They sounded like they were right by the window. I told my friends, and Em said it was probably the deer that always comes by. For 2 years now, Em had been feeding this deer, who always came up to this very window. I got pretty excited, as this meant this deer would come right up to my hand. I decided to look out the window, and I didn't see anything. It was too dark. I said that we should go outside to pet the deer, but Em and Sam said no. They reminded me about what happened earlier, and I agreed. So we went back to watching the movie. Another hour passed and we were all feeling tired. We turned off the TV and headed under our blankets. It was about 45 minutes later. Em and Sam were fast asleep, but I felt like I couldn't rest. Something was up. I had this gut feeling that told me not to go to sleep, so I decided to look outside. The moon was just bright enough that you could see the ocean, so I spent a few minutes just staring outside. As I was staring outside, my eye caught something moving in the woods over to the left. I turned my head that way, but I saw nothing. I knew I saw something moving, so I grabbed a flashlight that was on the bookshelf and I pointed it in the direction of where I saw the movement. Now, this was probably the worst idea I could have ever had, because when I did so, I saw that man again, but this time he didn't have any snow gear on. Instead, he was completely shirtless, and I wasn't about to find out what else he didn't have on. So I tried to wake up Em and Sam and tell them what I saw. Sam woke up, but Em was a deep sleeper. I told Sam to look outside, but when we looked, he was gone. Sam looked at me with a pretty angry expression, like I was just messing with her. I told her I wasn't, but she didn't believe me. She went back to bed, and I was left laying there. It was now about 4:30 in the morning. It was still dark outside. I didn't sleep at all. I felt myself drifting off to sleep when I heard a knock on the door. I almost jumped off the couch when I heard it. I knew I shouldn't open it, but my curiosity got the best of me. I walked over to the door and looked out of the peephole, and again I saw nothing. My head had to be playing with me. I again went back to the couch and threw my blanket over my head. I eventually fell asleep, but woke up at around 5 a.m. in a cold sweat. Something wasn't right again. My body wouldn't stop shaking. Then it hit me. That familiar stench, that disgusting smell. I almost threw up right there. But as fast as I sat up, I heard footsteps coming towards me and I screamed. I flicked on the flashlight, and as I did, I saw him, the man from earlier, standing in the corner of the room. My scream woke up Em and Sam, and they screamed too. And as we did this, the man bolted out of the house. Em's mom and dad came running down the stairs. After a few minutes, we told them everything that happened. Em's mom called the cops while Em's dad walked down the road with a shotgun, seeing if he could find the man. After that, once the police arrived and got all of our stories, I went home. My parents didn't tell me much when I got home. They hugged me for what felt like hours. And from that moment, I wasn't allowed at sleepovers anymore. Only now, years later, did I finally realize just how bad everything was. The police eventually found the guy, and inside that old shed we were daring each other to go into were 5 dead bodies. And that stench that was on that man's body was the smell of decaying flesh. And if things didn't go the way they went, in the end, my friends and I would have ended up in that shed. I work in risk management for a big bank in Manhattan. I've met a lot of cool people through this job. I go out to happy hour all the time with my coworkers. In 2019, a new guy named Sebastian was transferred to our office. I met him on his first day in the office. He seemed very sociable and talkative, and he'd always be laughing and smiling. He went out to happy hour with us that Friday, and he truly was the life of the party. always talking about all his experiences, all the places he's been and things he's done. There was not a dull moment with him. Eventually, Sebastian and I became friendly, and we went out together once in a while on weekends. I came to realize the more I got to know him that a lot of what he said may have been fabrications. His stories about all these beautiful women he allegedly got with, all these stories of hanging with celebrities. I started to just take everything that he said with a grain of salt, but I kept hanging with him because he was just easy to hang out with and kind of funny. Sebastian one day invited me to go with him and his sister to their condo in St. Pete Beach, Florida. His mom is very wealthy, owning a place in Beverly Hills, Colorado and St. Pete. She wouldn't be at the condo this particular weekend, so Sebastian said it would be fun. I invited my little brother to come along too. We all took the same flight. I met Sebastian's sister at the airport. She seemed pretty interesting. Hard to explain, but she was a bit quirky. The condo was actually decently nice. It had 3 bedrooms. I'd never been in a condo with 3 bedrooms before. Sebastian and his sister took a room each, so my brother Tyler and I shared a room. I told him if we meet any girls, he's sleeping on the couch though. Since we landed late, it was past beach hour. We went out to some beach bars which were pretty cool. It was a bit of an older crowd. Sebastian was getting really drunk really fast though for some reason. It was a chill vibe that wasn't sure why he was downing shots. I had to tell him to slow down when he started getting aggressive with people. This was the first time I'd seen him like this. He was also going up to every last girl he saw and drunkenly hitting on them. And 9 times out of 10, the girls seemed uncomfortable. Tyler and I laughed until it wasn't funny anymore, and it was more so embarrassing being seen with him. At one point, a bigger guy got in his face for talking to his girl, and I had to pull Sebastian away and apologize to the guy to de-escalate things. As we walked away, Sebastian pushed me and called me a piece of shit for not having his back. Tyler and I told him to just calm down. Even his sister was telling him to relax. Sebastian stormed off, I'm assuming back to the condo. Sister didn't say anything and just followed. This was an extremely bizarre start to the weekend. Tyler and I stayed and finished our drinks. These girls even came up to us and asked how we knew him, making a joke of it. We actually got their numbers, they were visiting too. They said they're going downtown later if we wanted to meet up, and we said we were down. So after that, I texted Sebastian asking where they went, and he texted back immediately that they went back to the condo. Tyler and I walked back to the condo and let ourselves in. We expected Sebastian to be angry, but instead, the second we walked in, he jumped off the couch all excited like, with a big smile on his face, saying, "Are we going out tonight or what?" He was still definitely really drunk. I told him, yeah, we should chill out here for a bit first though. Then I told him about the girls' numbers we got. Sebastian asked how many girls, and I said 2. His smile disappeared. Then Tyler, for some reason, told him that the girls came up to us after he left, asking how we knew you. I think he was saying it as a joke, kind of trying to playfully rip on him a bit, which was a mistake. Sebastian stormed away into his room and literally slammed the door shut. I was realizing he must be extremely bipolar or something. I was getting off vibes now, from both of them. I whispered to his sister, "Is he always like this?" And she replied, "Like what?" in a very standoffish way. "Never mind," I said. This was extremely uncomfortable. I was hoping maybe Sebastian would sober up and tomorrow would be better. Tyler and I chilled in our room for a little while. Sebastian never came out. I went over and knocked on the door and asked if he wanted to come out with us. He didn't answer. So we eventually Ubered without them to meet those 2 girls at some big clubby bar. As I was getting drunker, Sebastian started blowing up my phone with things like, "Where are you? How could you just leave me here? Your stuff is going in the street. Don't come back. I don't know why I invited you here." I showed Tyler and the girls and everyone was concerned. Something was wrong with Sebastian and he was showing it now. As much fun as we were having with the girls, we had to Uber back to the condo before Sebastian really did something stupid. When we got back, Sebastian was just sitting on the couch alone, looking at the wall. I asked if he was okay. He looked at me, then looked away and said, "Yeah, hope you had fun." Then he got up and went to his room and shut the door. Whatever, we went to bed. Tyler and I just stayed up talking to each other for like half an hour about Sebastian and about life in general. Then suddenly, we heard footsteps on the wood floor outside. We stopped talking. The footsteps came over to the door, then stopped. We both heard it. I spoke up to Tyler on the top bunk, whispering that Sebastian is right outside the door. He whispered back, "I know." He must have had his ear up to the door or something, listening to us. We didn't say a word. A literal 5 minutes go by before we heard his footsteps walk away from the door. Then we heard him talking outside. He was laughing and saying stuff, but we didn't hear his sister saying anything. I wanted to see who he was talking to, so I crept over to the door and opened it. I looked into the living room, which was dark, but I saw Sebastian in the corner leaning on the wall with one hand and his head down. He was laughing and talking to himself. I heard him say, "Joe is always such a stupid ditch," and then he laughed again. "My name is Joe." I closed the door quietly and went back to the bottom bunk. I whispered to Tyler what I just saw, and his response was simply, "What the fuck?" I told him we should leave tomorrow morning and get a hotel, and he agreed. We tried to go to sleep, but the talking and laughing outside went on for another 10 to 15 minutes. When it finally stopped, we heard the footsteps come outside the door again, stop for a minute, then go to his room, and then we heard his door shut. Finally, we felt comfortable going to sleep. By now, I was shot. I fell asleep pretty quickly. But I woke up probably only 20 minutes later. I sat up, knowing something woke me up. I looked at the door, and in front of it was Sebastian standing there. I jumped and said, "Yo, what are you doing?" He then lunged at the bed, screaming, trying to apparently strangle me, yelling, "You're a piece of shit." Tyler had to grab him off of me and throw him into the corner of the room. Sebastian yelled, "You suck, Joe. I invited you here just for you to shit on my life and talk shit about me to my sister." I, of course, tried to calm him down and rationalize, but there was no rationalizing with crazy. We packed our shit and called an Uber to a hotel, where we stayed until Sunday, then flew home. I saw Sebastian in the office the following few weeks, but he always avoided talking to me or looking at me. And he eventually transferred to a different office, probably because of me. Sebastian seemed cool and normal at first, but he was an example of a very sick, damaged person deep down. That night we spent in his condo absolutely terrified me. Thank you to Sandberg for sponsoring this video. Check the links below.